wondering where you are? You're in the digital realm. This is a vast and endless space where you can find anything you can dream of. We've got movies, images, text, audio, video, memes, and so much more. And I just love coming here and exploring it sometimes because every single time I come, there's always more stuff to see and experience and explore. This is one of my favorites. Where'd it go?
Once there was a little girl named Sally.
While laying in her bed, the cracks overhead more and more looked like a camel.
Warning, one day this video will disappear from all platforms, formats, and devices. There will be no traces of it in the digital realm or in the metaphysical world. All that will be left is your faint memory of it. You are now a witness. Do not forget this. Do not let...
In the era of endless scrolling, what does it mean when media gets lost? How do we define loss? How do we define media? Lost media is defined as any form of content, physical or digital, that once existed but eventually disappeared or got corrupted. The loss of media might be caused by a number of things, such as censorship, physical destruction, neglect, lack of storage, and more. On the surface, it might be frustrating when pieces of media you once cherished are nowhere to be found, leaving you with a vague memory of a YouTube video, a TV show episode, or a video game that you came across as a little kid. But it goes so much deeper than that. In fact, lost media has serious political implications when what we get to keep and remember is decided by powerful people and institutions. An image you once loved disappears, and you can scroll endlessly. You can look everywhere. You can always go back, but nothing and no one will be there. We are now compelled to travel back in time so that we can conceptualize what lost media is and explore how it started. Since the dawn of the modern age, artists, visionaries, and dreamers have been creating motion pictures to tell stories. Each story offers a glimpse into the life of the storyteller and the world around them. These motion pictures, now known as movies, allow the viewers to fully immerse themselves in these stories to escape from the horrors and the mundanity of everyday life. But you, as my witness, should not make the mistake of associating filmmaking exclusively with fictional works and Hollywood flicks, a mistake that many Americans made for several decades. Movie cameras, amateur or professional, are capable of documenting so much more. When we think of a movie today, we think of something that exists digitally. But back then, movies were filmed on 35mm nitrate film stock. These stocks were extremely fragile and highly flammable. If you still have one laying around in your house, it can even spontaneously ignite on its own depending on how damaged and decayed it is. The fragile nature of the tool made it really easy for films to get lost due to neglect. And it didn't help that studios back then did not prioritize preservation of these films and routinely discarded them after theatrical releases, so long-term care was not a consideration. According to the US Library of Congress, there are approximately 7,200 lost films between the years 1912 and 1929. The 1917 release Cleopatra had 2 copies that were destroyed. One in the 1937 Fox Studios fire, the other one in the 1958 fire at the Museum of Modern Arts in New York. The film was believed to be the most elaborate and expensive of its time, and remains the significant, partially lost silent film, with nothing but fragments surviving today. In 2023, James Fennell discovered a 41-second clip of the film on eBay and uploaded it on YouTube. Prior to this, there was only 20 seconds of the film available. Von Stroheim's 1924 release, Greed, is considered a masterpiece by the very few people who were able to see it in its entirety. At 8 hours 42 minutes and between 42 and 47 reels, it's recognized as the holy grail of lost films. It received multiple cuts and reductions by the industry, some being against Stroheim's wishes, until it was eventually brought down to just 18 reels. Stroheim later publicly disowned the film. London After Midnight was directed by Todd Browning in 1917, who later directed the 1931 release Dracula, which remains a cornerstone of modern horror. The last copy of London After Midnight was destroyed in the MGM Vault fire in 1965. Today, it's one of the most sought-after lost films of all time. It was reconstructed in 2002 using over 200 stills and the original script. The Mountain Eagle is the second film by legendary horror director and the master of suspense, Alfred Hitchcock. It ran between June of 1927 and January of 1928 and was a commercial fail. The distributors and the general public were unimpressed with the lack of realism and messy and unpolished continuity of the film. Despite being on the British Film Institute's Most Wanted British Films, Hitchcock himself called the movie awful and expressed that he's unbothered by the unavailability of it. Since nitrate was so flammable, manufacturers introduced acetate in 1909 as an alternative that wouldn't burn your house down. Then Kodak would produce film that used acetate with the label safety film written on it. And generally speaking, all relatively non-flammable substitutes were given the safety film title. In 1923, Kodak introduced the 16mm for home movies and education, then later the 8mm for amateur filmmaking. Both of these used acetate instead of nitrate. After nitrate was slowly phased out, then later discontinued in 1952, and became extremely popular with amateur and avant-garde filmmakers. By the time the 80s rolled around, most 16mm users had switched to video, and archives and libraries became the caretaker for 16mm film. Due to the lack of institutional support and uniform standards for preservation, the archives and libraries didn't do the best job keeping these old eras alive. Not a lot of people knew enough about preservation, conservation, restoration, or maintaining access. This is especially true for silent films, and this idea started in the 30s when talkies arrived and people didn't think that anyone would still be interested in silent films. Aside from neglect, fires, and natural decay, people would sometimes take the nitrate prints and burn them on purpose just to take the tiny amount of silver in them. We explored some of the most sought-after films from that era earlier, and you might have noticed that all of those movies were made by men. But the silent era was actually a time when a lot of women were involved in filmmaking. Cinema wasn't a recognized art form yet, and the power imbalances and the hierarchies that we see today weren't fully formed. And this made it easier for women to pursue a career in filmmaking. This is why it's exceptionally sad that most of this era is completely missing. Unlike the films we looked at earlier made by men that are still being discussed and searched for, women's contributions to cinema in the silent era rarely gets discussed, including Tessie Souders, who wrote, produced, and directed the 1922 release A Woman's Heir in Jim Crow-era America, and left behind no prints of the film and no images of her. Leontine Sagon's 1923 release, Men of Tomorrow, remains one of the first depictions of lesbian love in film. And Lois Weber, who notably chose controversial subjects for her films, released White Heat in 1934 about an interracial couple. It makes me wonder how different things would be now if those movies were preserved and studied. Where would we be right now if we preserved all the things that got lost? Like with everything, there's a hierarchy in the world of lost media, even with the stuff that's lost. Some lost artifacts are actively searched for and recognized, and some of them are forgotten. How physical film was treated for decades created several gaps in our history and cultural heritage. It's easy for me to sit here and say that we should have preserved all film, but in reality, film preservation takes so much diligence, care, and effort. It requires collaboration between public and private sectors because it takes so much funding for film to be preserved, especially in the case of orphan films that don't have a clear copyright holder. These films have to rely on nonprofits and public funding. But what does it mean to even preserve film? Film is not automatically preserved if you manage to keep the physical object for as long as you can. There are very specific steps and very specific terms when it comes to film preservation. Preservation is actually just a broad term to describe all of the practices that need to be done to keep film protected and accessible. It is not a one-time effort, but instead an ongoing process. Conservation is the protection of the original form of the artifact, and it can look like someone working on a duplicate instead of the original to keep it safe. Duplication is creating copies, and a film is considered officially safeguarded when both the original and the copies are available. Restoration is the reconstruction of the artifact and can sometimes involve image and sound enhancements. And finally, access is the ability to be watched, exhibited, and experienced, because preservation doesn't mean anything if you can't access the contents of an artifact. Because after all of this only matters because media preservation allows us to study our cultural heritage and history. Since the physical protection of these artifacts is clearly so complex, you would think that once we entered the digital era, everything was resolved. We now have clouds, USB sticks, backups of backups, hard drives, and so many other buzzwords and devices that we hear about that keep our cultural heritage safe and secure. Because as everyone knows, everything on the internet is forever. Right? That's wrong, obviously. Digital-born content gets lost, misplaced, corrupted, or deleted all the time. This happens so much that there are entire communities and fandoms dedicated to finding and discussing lost media that people once cherished or barely even remember. As I pointed out earlier, digital archives are inherently political, and digitization is not neutral. When it comes to deciding what to digitize and what to discard, it's usually big and powerful institutions calling the shots, and as with most things in life, money speaks louder than everything else. Like when Google scanned millions of books in 2004, they mostly partnered with libraries in the US and Western Europe, so they preserved the history of Western ideologies while Global South materials stayed less visible. Or like when Europeana was built as an alternative, it collected already digitized material from European libraries and museums. While that sounds good in theory, it reframed certain materials to push a shared European heritage agenda. While Croatian history would be shown as Croatian history in a Croatian archive, the second it was uploaded on Europeana, it got repackaged as a part of a shared European heritage. The whole idea of reframing history is political, which is why the way we categorize and label archives is so important. As Elizabeth Yale puts it, no archive is innocent. It's almost impossible to create an unbiased archive. Even charities and nonprofits can't promise a fully objective archive. Like the British Library's Endangered Archives project that's designed to digitize endangered archives from around the world that are experiencing physical decay or neglect. It's great to keep endangered archives alive, but that digitization still requires selection. Selection of what's endangered, selection of what has value, selection of how preservation will be funded, and selection of who gets to control access after. Power dynamics don't automatically go away just because the intentions are good. To combat this, there are some independent archives as well. Community archives preserving their own history when all else fails, like the Turkish Gezi Park archive documenting the protests that took place in Istanbul in 2013, and the crowd-funded Dara archive documenting the Syrian war. Other independent archives include fans and hobbyists creating websites and online archives without any academic or political motivation. While these rogue archives were once dismissed for being non-professional, They actually saved a great deal of material. The lost media community on the internet already proved their investigative skills with their successful searches. We owe the reemergence of several pieces of internet history to devoted fans finding and uploading them online. Perhaps the most significant example of community archiving is Internet Archive, a non-profit online library founded by Brewster Kahle. The website promotes an open and free digital archive and provides collections of digitized media for users. Even individuals privately archiving content is highly significant. Anyone can save and preserve content, even you or me. A notable consideration when digitizing and archiving content is metadata and labeling. You could keep an archive secure forever, but if you don't properly define the contents of it, then it becomes meaningless. Metadata, like many other aspects of archiving, is not neutral. Like some Dutch colonial archives, using biased and negative terminology to describe Indonesians. If you're digitizing biased archives and not changing the metadata, then all you're doing is enforcing the same power dynamics and preserving the same material that's already been prioritized. Over the years, the lost media community evolved from a group of niche online forums to a fully formed digital subculture with its own history, memes, inside jokes, and lore. In the early days of the internet, shortly after the creation of Internet Archive pioneered digital preservation culture, curious users began analyzing and discussing lost or obscure media on early 4chan boards and Something Awful threads. In the early 2000s, media enthusiasts often discussed lost cartoon episodes, commercials, or obscure clips. The community matured gradually as time went on, with events like the launch of the Lost Media Wiki in 2012 and the subreddit r/lostmedia in 2015. Other enthusiasts on YouTube joined the conversation and rapidly gained credibility due to their devotion, research skills, and respect for the media that they cover. I looked deeply into the lost media community and found 4 examples of intense searches that resulted in the discovery of lost media. These examples display the community's devotion and commitment. Some of these cases involve false leads and mythologies surrounding the material. The first one is cracks.
While laying in her bed, the cracks overhead more and more looked like a camel. Today's a rainy day and I can't...
A 1975 Sesame Street segment that became popular in the 2000s, after it vanished with zero explanation and quickly became a collective childhood memory.
Again, they were standing by Crack Hen. Hello to you, Miss Hen. Meet my friend.
The plot is widely recognized as being unsettling, or maybe people just found it unsettling because they watched it when they were little. It involves a girl looking at cracks on the wall and imagining shapes. Then, the crack master appears with his big and warped face and starts screaming and destroys himself with his own aggression. Later, the girl goes outside after the rain stops. The search began in 2008 with people reminiscing and sharing their own memories with cracks. A fan named John Armand led the search. Sesame Workshop would not talk about the show, and some theories suggested that it got cancelled because it was too scary or because the word crack got associated with cocaine. The search for cracks is more bizarre than the content itself. It ends with Armand mysteriously and anonymously getting a copy of Cracks in the mail, but he's not allowed to share it online. He hosts secret screenings and uploads a 9-minute audio documentary, including a reading of the script in 2009. In 2013, Lost Media Wiki founder Byte ends up with an English copy of it and releases it. Another example is Clockman, a 1976 paper cutout animated short from communist Czechoslovakia that got translated into English and made it to American TV under the name
Because
Sally.
she had a really fussy mother who was always saying, don't lose this and don't lose that. Especially when she gave her something brand new like gloves. Please keep Heidi, because you
Just like cracks, people remember Clockman being scary and unsettling.
forget about their deal.
They call it Clockman because they remember a creepy man coming out of a clock and a child being taken away. It got a new name since no one could remember what it was called. Clockman allegedly aired as a pinwheel, but there is no documented proof of that. The original Czech version was inspired by an English folktale. Czechoslovakia, being a communist nation at the time, meant that directors often didn't know where their films would end up. When it was picked up by Learning Corporation of America in 1978, it was retitled and the narrator changed. The search for Clockman started in 2012. Users searched Quebec folklore, Irish folklore, pinwheel footage, and more. The original Czech version was found 5 years later in 2017. An English dub resurfaced in 2018, and a 4K scan was uploaded to archive.org in 2019. This long and extensive search is a big part of internet history. The next one is another Sesame Street episode depicting the Wicked Witch of the West. This episode received a lot of backlash involving angry parents complaining about their kids being traumatized by the witch's appearance. The episode was locked away and never aired again. It was leaked anonymously and illegally in 2022. The community is discouraged from sharing any clips for legal reasons. The last example is a snippet of a song that an internet user found in his old recordings and asked people to find out where it was from. The song, like the other examples, rapidly became a major topic of discussion. In 2024, someone posted it on YouTube with a picture of a pink boombox. The boombox immediately became associated with the song and was described as having sinister and unsettling energy, even though it's just a picture of a boombox and it's not even associated with the song. Today, the lost media community is almost a small digital ecosystem that has their own collective history. They often remix examples of lost media and write evolving canon and shared mythology surrounding the topics that they discuss and the media that they look for. Their interest in lost media is deeply personal and usually comes from a place of passion, fascination, and curiosity. Oftentimes, this manifests as morbid curiosity. When we step into the world of lost media on the internet, we see that most of the time people talk about it in a dark, grim tone. We see the words disturbing, unsettling, and bizarre plastered across these YouTube video titles. We hear ominous music in the background as we watch people analyze every single detail about the content, the loss, and the search like their lives depend on it. Lost media enthusiasts go to great lengths and sometimes devote years to find certain pieces of media. At times, the media found ends up being underwhelming or lacking value, while sometimes the media discussed can have disturbing undertones. Other times, it seems like the community artificially constructs morbid elements to force the media to be more interesting. In fact, the artificial creation and exaggeration of bleakness and grim imagery has become so commonplace that it became a common critique in the community and caused people to make memes and jokes about the overdramatic nature of these searches. Another common criticism for the lost media community is the overfixation on insignificant pieces of media. When we're discussing lost digital artifacts, we have to remember that scarcity alone does not make media valuable. And just because something is missing doesn't mean that we need it. If you come across a piece of lost media and you want it to be found, ask yourself these questions. Who made it? Why did it disappear? Is anyone looking for it? What would finding it accomplish? Do we really need it? Can it be found ethically? And what can we do with it once we find it? I find that the community experienced an ideological drift that resulted in the obsession of the idea of deletion, not what is deleted. Over the course of my research, I discovered that the community is passionate, driven, and highly skilled. But at the same time, it seems like the deep desire for something to be interesting and valuable sometimes makes the community create their own interpretations of material that might be exaggerated, wrong, or simply insignificant. A big portion of why lost media is so fascinating to many is the element of nostalgia. Our society is deeply entranced with the past. Nostalgia has been a selling point for generations now. A deep sense of longing for a simpler time, a better time, a lost time. The intense dissatisfaction with the present, missed opportunities, unfulfilled promises, and the illusion that reliving the past would be more rewarding than being stuck in the present. And this is especially true for Gen Z and young millennials. Being born into a physical world and witnessing the transition into a digital one in your formative years is likely going to change the way you experience reality. And this is why early days of the internet trigger the sense of longing in online users. Back then, the internet was a place that we would physically go to, and not something that follows us around. The computer was in a room, not in our pockets. Those days represent the beginning of our generation finding a sense of self, a sense of community, a sense of belonging, something most of us miss deeply. The online community often discusses early examples of lost online content because they personally remember seeing it when they were younger. Collective nostalgia proves to be even stronger than individual nostalgia. It's extremely frustrating when something exists in your memory, but all you can remember are vague details about it. You spent hours, days, weeks looking for it, but to no avail. It eats at you, begging to be experienced just one last time so you can move on with your life. Maybe if you come across it one more time, you'll feel the way you felt when you first saw it. Naive, undamaged, unaware of the complexity of the world that we live in today. Maybe seeing a cartoon episode that disappeared is the last piece of the puzzle for you. No one likes the unknown, and no one likes the unfinished. Who wouldn't want to go back and find something that existed that's gone now? When you have these feelings, going online and seeing that someone else had the same experience, longing, and desire to locate the same thing that you've been looking for, it strengthens the impact that nostalgia has on you. You don't just feel nostalgic for your own past, but also for your community's past. In this case, connecting with others over memories that you both share breaks down geographical barriers. You could be from 2 different continents and have the same memory of a TV show that you both watched as little kids. You both want to see it again, talk about it, restore it, even go back to it. It's no wonder people are obsessed with the idea of deletion and unavailability. It's simply hard to accept that you can't have something that you once had. After my extensive research on lost media and digital preservation, I discovered one thing. There is no right answer. The world is changing. Preservation practices are changing. We are so deep into a convoluted system in which we keep preserving the same ideologies and retelling the same information because we can't decide what's worth preserving and what isn't. So some ideologies repeatedly get neglected while others repeatedly get prioritized. All archives are biased, and it's not feasible to trust one platform or one institution to preserve cultural media because those have historically prioritized Western cultural artifacts and ideologies. Community-driven preservation is so important because fans, hobbyists, and enthusiasts care, and they care a lot. What sets them apart is a deep human desire to fulfill their own passion and curiosity, and not a political motivation to erase certain sets of beliefs. This all may explain why the online lost media community focuses on pieces of media that may seem irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. Despite the disappearance of so much content that has artistic and cultural merit, there's an evident fixation on more sensationalized examples of lost media that may be insignificant at their core. It's easy to be captivated by words like banned, bizarre, dark, unsolved, and get invested in examples that are framed to seem more interesting than they really are. It's more fun to focus on lost media that may seem more unsettling and forbidden than to devote time and effort into understanding the systemic problems behind media loss. It's hard work, it's complex, and it's a lot less engaging than looking for a cartoon episode or a snippet of a song that an unknown user posted on the internet. Considering how essential community archiving is for important, endangered, and lost media, I highly encourage the lost media community to be mindful of why archiving and preservation matter. Bitter irony proves that attempting to save everything also contributes to the loss of media. If we don't have proper preservation practices, metadata, and organized archives, then it becomes extremely difficult to keep every important piece of media. This means that we have to get rid of certain media to make room for other, more important media. You might be a witness, but you don't have to remember everything you see.